Here's the hind leg, and we're going to work through the ligaments and tendons of it in the same way as we did for the front leg. We'll deal with the lower part of the limb fairly quickly because that in principle is very, very similar to the fetlock and toes in the front leg. So we'll do this bit quickly. Then we'll focus on this region of the tibia area. Then we'll focus on the stifle joint up here. This is the lower section of the leg, and you can see they're a little bit floppy, but you can see that we've got superficial and deep digital flexor tendons. Hidden down where my finger's running is a suspensory ligament. Here are digital extensor tendons. So to all intents and purposes, there's some subtle differences between this and the front foot, but otherwise it works pretty much the same. It's fetlock extension under load and the fetlock flicking back when the foot comes off the ground. If we now move to this region of the leg, between the stifle and the hock, things get really interesting. Here's two tendons that started off life as muscles. This one is the superficial digital flexor, and that's the one whose tendon keeps going down, but it attaches here to the heel bone. It also attaches to the back of the thigh bone, so there it is, nice big rubber band right in there. On the other side of the leg, we have a similar rubber band starting on the thigh bone again and going down to the cannon bone. And this fancy name for this is the Peroneus Tertius. I don't know whether it's got a common name or not, but it's Peroneus Tertius. And what the two of them do is allow the leg, or the two joints, to work together. So if I take this off the ground and I hold the thigh bone, and I hold the tibia, and what I'm going to do is make this upper hand work the stifle. So I work the stifle, and look what's happening to the hock. They work together because when the thigh bone's going up, it pulls on this one, straightens things out. When the thigh bone is going down, it pulls on this one, bends the bottom. So as the leg is coming off the ground, this one is stretched. And as the leg comes off the ground, it rebounds and collapses the leg to bring it forwards. And as the leg comes forwards, it straightens out. And then as it comes on the ground, this one is stretched. So they do two things. They passively work the joints themselves, but they also allow the huge, great big muscles up here, which connect to these, to work all the way down the leg. So you don't have to have large muscles at every segment of the leg. You use the big ones at the top, the hammerhead of muscles at the top, connect them to these, and they drive the whole leg. It's the most ingenious mechanism you've ever seen. For our last piece of fun, we're going to look at the stifle, which again is a very interesting joint. Here's the kneecap, and you can see that the kneecap attaches to the tibia bone by three very strong ligaments. And they're the ones that when the muscle up here contracts, they allow the animal to kick forward. Kicking action in us is transmitted this way. So we've got the kneecap attached to a huge, great big muscle. Quadriceps, if you want the name. And normally, as the stifle is bending, the kneecap just slides up and down. And your kneecap does exactly that when you're bending and extending the stifle. You can actually put your hand on your kneecap and feel it sliding. But what the horse can do when it's standing is it can take the weight off this leg, straighten out the stifle, and see how that kneecap pops up on top? So look at it in front view. There's the sliding kneecap. And then it just pops up on top of this large prominence on the thigh bone. And when it's locked in that position, it locks the stifle. That stifle does not bend. But, and this is where if we zoom out, we can see the effect down the leg. If the stifle does not bend, then remember these two that work the stifle and the hock together? If the stifle's locked, these two lock the hock. So now, and the fetlock is in its normal bent position, so now the animal can put all its weight, leg weight on the top bone, and it goes all the way down through the leg. The leg's just like a strut. It's not going to bend. And that's where you'll see them. When they're standing, what you'll see is they'll be standing with bent leg. They'll take weight off their leg, straighten this one out just so they can get the lock into position, and then put weight on this leg and take the other one off the ground. And they'll stand like that for 15 minutes. Then they'll shift the weight, unlock, bend this one again. But it allows them to stand with very, very little muscular effort whatsoever. All the big muscles of the leg go totally quiet. So amazing energy-saving mechanism for standing around. But it's part of the mechanism that originally evolved for saving energy in motion. So it's really quite a neat combination. Even more neat is that cows have all the parts, all the ligaments and this big prominence, but they haven't found how to lock it. Finding the lock was a horse thing. We've seen what a wonderful mechanism for saving energy this is. Now let's think about the consequences for injury. In the lower leg, the consequences are pretty much the same as the front leg, tendon injuries, potentially bone fractures, but this part of the limb is loaded less than the same part of the limb in the front limb, except for jumping horses taking off, but usually less. So for most horses, this area is not as prevalent, it doesn't see injuries as prevalent as in the front limb. When we get to the hock, the major issue with the hock is if it twists. Because if you get twisting of the hock, you can strain all the ligaments, little ligaments in here, you can chip fracture bones. The hock is actually quite vulnerable, and also to disease. Moving up, very rarely you'll get a rupture of this Peroneus Tertius. It does happen, and it allows the animal to look really weird because it can have a bent knee and a straight hock. And if you can imagine a horse with a bent stifle and a straight hock, that would look really weird. But rare, but it does happen. Stifle itself, pretty stable joint. Human knees are very, very vulnerable. Horse stifles, not so much. One of the problems it can get is permanent lock, where the animal locks its joint and can't get it unlocked. You do get joint problems in the stifle, but they're relatively rare because it's a big joint and it's wide and it's stable. So hock and to a lesser extent lower limb, where we see consequences of this high loading environment that the leg's in.